The last time the Alien Enemies Act was invoked, it was used to detain and deport German, Japanese, Italian immigrants during World War II.
So Somalis brought more than just built they didn't just build the economy, but we contribute to the soul of this great state. And I want to remind you that no human is illegal, ever. You are not illegal. Our neighbors are not illegal. And yeah, thank you.
Large-scale raids targeting federal fraud currently underway. Federal agents seen leaving the Quality Learning Center. And Brooke Taylor has more on that and what they're looking for. Brooke, good morning.
Hi, Bill. Good morning. Yeah, we have had a photographer there at the daycare since this morning, capturing video of those federal agents just going in and out of the building, collecting evidence as part of the DOJ's fraud investigation in Minnesota. Take a look at this video here. Sources tell Fox that federal agents are raiding about 22 businesses across Minneapolis this morning. And sources say many of them are tied to Somali-owned operations. All of this comes after that viral YouTube video from Nick Shirley. It was back in December. In that video, he visited different child care centers.
Something feels off right now, and you can hear it in that clip. On one side, people are bringing up history, talking about past government actions and broad ideas about immigration and identity. Mention even World War XI. Never knew that existed. But on the other side, you got federal agents walking into buildings in Minneapolis as part of a fraud investigation tied to daycare centers. Those are two very different conversations. And somehow they're being blended together like they're the same thing. From my perspective, that's where a lot of confusion starts. Because if we slow this down and look at what's actually happening, this isn't about labeling people or going after communities. This is about alleged misuse of taxpayer money and whether the system is finally doing something about it. And for a lot of people watching this, that's been a long time coming. Think about it in real life terms. You got families working full time, paying taxes every single paycheck, trying to afford childcare, rent, groceries, everything getting more expensive by the year, depending on your state, I should say. Then they hear that money meant for programs like childcare support may have been misused or exploited. That doesn't feel like a political issue to them. That feels personal. It feels like the system isn't protecting the people who are actually following the rules. And here's what this actually looks like. A small business owner in Minneapolis misses something on their taxes. They're dealing with penalties almost immediately. A regular worker underreports income. They're getting letters, audits, consequences. But when it comes to large public programs, with serious amounts of money involved, it can take years before anything real happens. And now that something is happening, now that there are federal raids across multiple locations tied to this investigation, the reaction is split. Some people are saying this is basic accountability, exactly what should happen if there's credible evidence of fraud. Others are pushing back, shifting the focus toward broader political or social concerns. And this is where it doesn't add up for a lot of everyday taxpayers. Because at the end of the day, the question is actually very simple. If taxpayer money is being misused, should it be investigated or not? That shouldn't depend on politics. That shouldn't depend on narratives. It should be a yes across the board in regards of accountability. And the fact that this even turns into a debate is exactly why people feel like something is off. This isn't about going after individuals or making it about identity. It's about whether the same rules apply to everyone and whether public money is being handled the way it's supposed to. That's it. And right now, a lot of people are looking at what's happening in Minneapolis and thinking, this is what accountability is supposed to look like. So hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and then I want you guys to check this out.
Homeland Security investigations, along with state, federal, and local law enforcement, raided 22 Minneapolis businesses today, Tuesday, April 28th. HSI said that these were court-authorized law enforcement operations in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. For reasons of operational security and for the safety of our agents, we will not comment further at this time. A good portion of the businesses that they raided were the Somali-owned childcares that were presented in Nick Shirley's viral video that had no evidence or support for the claims that he was making. Now, they are saying this has nothing to do with immigration and customs enforcement, even though HSI is a division within immigration and customs enforcement. It's also not surprising that the majority of these businesses were Somali-owned. Retribution's coming to Minnesota, right? Terrorizing our communities, terrorizing brown and black people is the point. Traumatizing them, making them feel unsafe in their places of work, in their homes, in their schools. That's the point. And I know there's going to be people in my post. Good. They're getting the fraud. They're terrorizing and traumatizing children and people that are in our communities. There are other ways to combat fraud than going on a Tuesday morning to a child care and raiding it. So for those of you wondering, it hasn't ended in Minnesota. It's still very, very much on our front door.
Let's be real for a second. This didn't just come out of nowhere. What you're seeing right now is something that's been building for a long time. And a lot of people feel like they've been watching the same pattern over and over again. Stories come out, concerns get raised, maybe there's a little bit of attention on it, and then it just fades away and nothing really happens. So over time, people start asking a simple question. Did anything actually change, or did it just get swept under the rug again? That's the context here. So when you hear that federal agents are now carrying out court-authorized raids across more than 20 locations tied to an alleged fraud investigation, a lot of people are looking at that and saying, okay, this is different. This is actual movement. Here's what this actually looks like in real life. If you are a taxpayer, you're not thinking about political talking points first. You're thinking about whether the system, aka the IRS, is working the way it's supposed to in regards to making sure not only do individuals file their taxes accordingly to the right department, but also within your state, such as your governor, your mayors, and your local legislators are allocating funds for its rightful purpose. You're working, money is coming out of your paycheck every week, and that money is supposed to go towards programs that help people who need it. Things like child care support and community services. But when there are credible allegations that those systems are being taken advantage of, and it goes for a long time without consequences, frustration builds. It's not complicated. People just want to know that someone is paying attention and that the rules actually mean something. Because I have just learned something about the broken window theory, right? And for you guys who don't know what the broken window theory is, basically, if you see a broken window and no one does nothing about it because there's been constant broken windows in the neighborhood, then individuals will see it as so that is normal and say, you know what, nobody cares, so why should I care? And look at it as a way, or how can I put it? Look at it like a way of opportunity. That's all that's called, an available option of opportunity to break some more windows, right? I'll show you guys in a second. The broken windows theory, proposed in 1982 by James Q. Wilson and George L. Kellen, posed that visible signs of disorder like graffiti, litter, or broken windows. So, for example, if a community, let's say a hood, happens to be where things aren't up to par, individuals aren't taking their trash out on time, there's litter everywhere, there's trash, individuals are not taking care of their houses, and rules are not being upheld connected to the city or within whatever county tied to those local legislators within those cities, upholding the rules when it comes to making sure that property owners, if it snows, that their walkways be cleared, trash be up in a neat way and put in a corner on the day of trash night, not put out there as trash whenever they feel like it. So all I'm saying is with the broken windows theory, when you see graffiti, litter, or broken windows, it creates an environment that encourages more serious crime because of in their mind, nobody's going to check us. Ain't nobody doing nothing about it. We're not getting held accountable. And what happens is that lack of community care starts to be more of it, fostering a sense of lawlessness that they won't be held accountable to the furthest extent of the law. And it just embodies criminal behavior. So what you call that is a way of seeking out an open opportunity. And even if it fosters the simple fact of breaking more windows or doing something that's not being held accountable from a law standpoint, if that means, for example, with the Kias, they call them Kia boys in the hood, where they would take Kias, basically use some type of tactic. It was all on TikTok. It went viral, where they found the method when it came to Hyundais and Kias, those type of vehicles, where young kids were using somehow they were using a USB. They were taking apart and tearing up people steering wheel system and steer wheel, and being able to use a charger to basically turn the car on. And within those neighborhoods that end up turning into hoods, because a hood is basically a community that where crime is run rampant, full of lawlessness, full of broken windows, metaphorically, using this analogy to foster more crimes, and nobody can do nothing about it. Even though the individuals in the neighborhood that do their part to keep up with their neighborhood and keep up with their homes and actually care, because now it's not for all people. Not all people are this way. Some people within neighborhoods or even a hood that has a lot of crime running rampant still try to take care of their things, because in their mind, just because they live in the hood doesn't mean they have to act like the hood, fostering this broken windows theory. And I'm saying all that to say that you can always look at windows of opportunity from a bad standpoint or a good standpoint, depending on what has been influenced in your mind, or what you allow to influence you in your mind to see things as the rightful opportunity. And that could be good or bad. And individuals and kids and children can grow up, if they are in these communities that foster this type of lawlessness, to do more of it and seem acceptable. So take it with the example with this Somali fraud, and when it comes to American taxpayers and programs that are supposed to help those who need a leg up, that's trying to figure out life and do what they need to do and pave their own way so they don't have to keep living paycheck to paycheck. So they have some relief until they're able to work themselves up to be able to hold their own and take care of their kids, right? Because everybody need help from time to time, right? Life is full of ups and downs. But hopefully within those opportunities of getting help, you are making the rightful choices to not rely on help, but use that help as a way to sustain yourself. So when you're seeing these systems that are supposed to help people, and you got credible allegations that those systems are being taken advantage of, and it goes for a long time without consequences, connecting it to the broken windows theory, frustration builds. It's not complicated. People just want to know that someone is paying attention, that rules actually mean something. And this is where the reaction splits. Some people see these raids and say, finally, accountability. This is what should happen if there's evidence of fraud. Other people look at the same situation and say, it feels aggressive, it feels disruptive, it feels like it's creating a fear in communities. But then on the other side, they're basically saying, which fear would you like of the two fears? A fear of lawlessness and crime running rampant in your community, or the simple fact of the fear posed in the way of security that actually creates fear for the criminals to stop having lawlessness being advocated in your communities? Which one do you want? That's what the other side would say. What type of fear you want? You want the fear of criminals taking over your communities full of broken windows? Or do you want the fear that's posed in a good way of security with law enforcement that actually make the criminals go away out of fear of being held accountable to the full extent? Let me know what you guys think about that in the comments. And that's the concern. That concern is worth acknowledging, because nobody wants to see families or kids caught in the middle of something like this. With my broken window theory analogy and metaphorically tying it to this with accountability and things like that, because I want you guys to understand that the conversation goes bigger than this. But this is where it doesn't add up for a lot of people watching, because if there's real evidence of fraud involving taxpayer money, how exactly is it supposed to be handled? That's what the other side would say to the other side that believe that it's too aggressive. And you heard the woman in the clip. Oh, who goes to a daycare and raid them early in the morning on a Tuesday? The other side is saying, well, how is it supposed to be handled? These type of investigations are not quiet or convenient. They happen in real time in real places because law enforcement is trying to secure evidence before it disappears. Think about it. If a small business is suspected of financial wrongdoing, authorities don't just politely wait and hope everything stays in place and they act when they need to. That's standard procedure. From my perspective, what's really driving the reaction here is something bigger than just this one case. It's about whether the system is actually willing to follow through. People have seen headlines before. They heard promises before, but follow through is what's been missing in their eyes. So now that something invisible is happening, it's getting attention, not because people want chaos, but because they want consistency. They want to know the same rules apply across the board. And the only way you would know if something is successful is how consistent is being applied across all levels evenly across the board, which then you would see how it yield results. And the results would speak for themselves in a good or bad way. And yeah, there's always going to be a political layer to this, especially when something is visible happens. But if you strip that away, the core issue is simple. If taxpayer money is being misused, it should be investigated. The same way, if you, an American taxpayer who trying to figure it out, and in due time, you don't pay your taxes or report on monies or whatever the case may be, you will be held accountable by the IRS. And they'll take everything you got. So, hey, if there's evidence, there should be action, right? Across the board. It's not extreme. That's basic accountability. And for a lot of people watching this, the reaction isn't outrage. It's more like, it's about time. Check it out.
And thanks for joining us here on Fox 9 Morning News at 11 and on Fox Local. I'm Tom Butler. We start with breaking news this morning. Federal agents are fanning out across the Minneapolis area, conducting search warrants in connection with fraud investigations. Our Bill Keller joins us live from Minneapolis with the very latest in what sounds like, Bill, a large-scale operation. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, this has really been an active scene since early this morning. Unlike a lot of other high-risk warrants, there are no SWAT teams, no lights and sirens, just unmarked vehicles and federal agents armed with search warrants. Here's what we know. We've been out here since about 8 o'clock this morning, and at the center of this raid is a building near 28th and Park Avenue South. This is in the Phillips West neighborhood. On that building, there are signs for what appear to be two different businesses, including one, a child care center, another called the Somali Senior Center. But this is just one of 24 spots, we're told, where federal agents are stopping today. According to the FBI and Homeland Security, agents currently executing 22 court-ordered warrants across the metro area. They say they're leaving no stone will be left unturned. We have seen agents going in the building with stacks of empty boxes as investigators likely will be collecting a trove of evidence. Now, we are told this is not immigration related, but part of a federal fraud investigation that's looking largely, though, into these Somali-owned businesses. According to Special Agent Matthew Vogel, federal, state, and local law enforcement are now doing this as part of an ongoing criminal investigation into what they describe as, quote, rampant fraud of taxpayer dollars. Word of this new fraud investigation has many lawmakers reacting. Minnesota Congressman Tom Emmer releasing a statement which read in part, President Trump and his administration have made it crystal clear our country will not tolerate waste, fraud, and abuse, and we are not going to allow people to take advantage of Americans' generosity. In fact, while the exact focus of this investigation is still unclear, the Minnesota Department of Children, Youth, and Families, which oversees some of these facilities, they say today's raids were actually the result of state, county, and federal agencies working together to root out fraud and hold bad actors accountable. Governor Walz just posting on social media, if you commit fraud in Minnesota, you're going to get caught. And that's exactly what we saw today. He goes on to say that we catch criminals when state and federal agencies share information. Joint investigations work, and securing justice depends on it. Tom, worth noting, the city of Minneapolis telling its residents, they're making it clear they had no part in this. They were not asked to assist in the execution of any of these criminal warrants. We'll have the very latest in our later newscast, but for now, we'll throw back to you.
Yeah, we will stay on top of this big story here. All right, Bill Keller with all the details. Bill, thanks so much for the report. Appreciate it so much.
So, family.
Another defendant in the Feeding Our Future fraud scandal is set to be sentenced this afternoon. 38-year-old Mulata Ali pleaded guilty to one count of theft of government funds, helping launder money that was meant to feed underserved children. The government is recommending 1 year and 1 day for a prison sentence.
So, family, let's slow this down and really look at what's being said here, because this is where the bigger picture starts to come into focus. You got federal agents executing 22 court-ordered search warrants across Minneapolis, multiple locations, coordinated effort between federal, state, and local agencies, and they're describing it as large-scale fraud investigation involving taxpayer dollars. No SWAT teams, no chaos, no emergency situation, just agents showing up with warrants, collecting evidence, doing what investigators do when they believe there's a serious financial crime. And that matters because it tells you this wasn't random and it wasn't rushed. This went through a legal process. A judge signed off on it, multiple agencies coordinated on it, and that's how the system is supposed to work when it's functioning. Now, some people would say it's too slow. This has been going on since last year, months ago. They should have been jumped on it. The evidence may be wiped out. That's a fair criticism, as critics would say. Now, it gets interesting because at the same time, officials are going out their way to say this is not about immigration, and they're being clear about that, very clear. And they're saying this is about fraud, specifically what they're calling rampant fraud of taxpayer dollars. So if we take that at face value, then the focus here is simple. It's about whether public money was being used the way it was intended or not. That's it. But then you step back and look at how this plays out in the real world. And this is where people start connecting it to something bigger. Because when you hear about rampant fraud tied to public programs, people immediately think about trust. They think about where their money is going. They think about whether the systems in place are actually being monitored the way they should be. I've seen some people saying, shoot, and I don't advocate for this, family, file your taxes, follow the law, abide by the law, always. But you have some individuals on social media saying out loud publicly that they are refusing to pay taxes because they don't trust where their monies are going, as they say they were, because of frauds and stuff like this taking place. Now, I don't advocate for that. But however, if you have a legal way of tax loopholes to lower your tax burden legally, if you have expenses to write off or whatever the case may be, I will advocate for that. But not to file taxes at all. File your taxes, the IRS, report your monies, do what you're supposed to do, abide by the law. But think about the Constitution for a second. Not in some abstract way, but in a practical sense. The whole idea behind our system is that government is accountable to the people. That includes how money is spent. Taxpayer dollars aren't unlimited, and they're not supposed to be loosely handed out without oversight. The founders were very clear about limiting government power, but also making sure there were checks in place so abuse doesn't happen. And in modern terms, that translates to something pretty simple. If the government is collecting money from the public, there has to be responsibility in how that money is managed. Now, to be fair, there are people who hear about raids like this and are concerned about how it affects communities. They worry about disruption, about people being caught in the middle of investigations, about whether enforcement is being applied fairly. And those concerns aren't coming out of nowhere in any large operation like this. There's always going to be an impact beyond just the investigation itself. But this is where the other side argument comes in. And it's the part that a lot of everyday taxpayers are focused on. If there is credible evidence of widespread fraud, especially involving programs meant to help families and children, like the Feed in Our Future program, then not acting on it would be a failure of the system. It would mean the rules only exist on paper. And that's where frustration has been building for years. Because people don't mind helping. They don't mind programs. They support communities, but they do mind the idea that those systems can be taken advantage of without consequences. That's where the trust breaks down. Once trust is gone, it's very hard to get it back. So what you're seeing right now is more than just a series of raids. It's a test of whether the system is actually willing to enforce accountability when it matters. It's a test of whether laws are applied evenly, whether oversight is real, and whether taxpayer money is treated with the level of seriousness people expect the same way the seriousness is upheld and expected to make sure you file and pay your taxes. And from my perspective, that's why this is getting so much attention, because it goes beyond politics. It gets into something much more basic. Does the system actually work the way it's supposed to or not?
More on this tonight. We are joined live by Minnesota State Representative Kristen Robbins. She's the chair of the Minnesota House Fraud Prevention and State Oversight Committee, also a candidate for Minnesota governor. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And we hear from Congresswoman Omar, who has said this discrepancy involving the Safari restaurant was nothing more than an accounting error. She has said that this is all just a partisan stunt. What is your response to those comments?
Well, I take issue with that. This is not a partisan stunt. This is billions of Minnesota tax dollars and federal tax dollars, because it's a federal school meals program, that have been stolen. And she had a close relationship with some of the fraudsters who owned the Safari restaurant. She had her campaign events there. She appeared in a video that we played in committee where she was speaking in Somali from the restaurant, explaining how the Meals Act, her bill, is what created the opportunity for people to have much more access to these meals during COVID. So she was in on this from the beginning, and I think she should, as a public official, come and answer the questions. So she didn't show up. She didn't respond to us. She didn't respond to a reporter. So we've set a deadline for May 5th for her to respond to our questions.
What specific evidence do you have in regards to the Congresswoman's role in this alleged fraud case?
So there are a few things that are raising concerns, which is why we want to talk to her. So the first is that she authored the Meals Act, which was passed in March of 2020, and that took the guardrails off the federal school nutrition program. So all of a sudden, income requirements, the need to eat the meal on site, the fact that restaurants were now able to provide the meals, all of that happened because of her bill. So she took the guardrails off the program, and then her friends who own the restaurant and were some of the convicted fraudsters jumped right in and participated. So we need to understand that relationship. But also in the case, the court case, Feeding Our Future, which was the U.S. versus Amy Bach, her staff is listed in many of the trial exhibits for communications between her office and the Feeding Our Future people. So I want to get those underlying exhibit documents, and so I've asked her office for them. I think it's very important that we understand what kind of communication she was having with these fraudsters. And not everyone in the documents has been charged, but many of the people have been charged and convicted, and those that aren't, still had a relationship with her office. So we're trying to just understand the truth. And I think she owes it to taxpayers in Minnesota and around the country to come in and answer these questions.
Do you have a message for the Congresswoman tonight?
My door is open. I would love to meet with you and your staff. We would love to give you a platform to testify and share your side of the story. So we do hope you will come and join us at the House Fraud Prevention Committee.
I mean, you have given the Congresswoman a May 5th deadline to produce documents, to answer questions in writing. It seems that as a federal lawmaker, she doesn't seem clearly legally obligated to appear before a state committee. What happens if she misses that deadline?
I've been in touch with my colleagues at the House Oversight Committee, because this was a state program where the fraud happened, but it's a federal program, the federal school nutrition program, where the money comes from. So the federal government also has jurisdiction over this. So I've encouraged our colleagues on the House Oversight Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee in Washington to also take a look at this. And obviously, they also have jurisdiction over the changes in her campaign finance report, which showed she had at one point between $6 and $30 million, and now all of a sudden she has, under $100,000, and that's wholly their jurisdiction. But I also hope they get to the bottom of that, because clearly there's something very amiss there.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download.
Let's talk about this part, because this is where things start to feel a little backwards. We got Governor Tim Walz coming out and basically saying this is what happens when everyone works together, state, local, federal, all coordinating to get results. And on the surface, that sounds fine. Cooperation is a good thing. Nobody's arguing against that. But here's where it doesn't add up. If this level of coordination works so well, if this is what it takes to actually address large-scale fraud, then the obvious question is, why wasn't this happening earlier? That's what a lot of people are asking. Because from their perspective, concerns about misuse of funds in these kinds of programs didn't just appear overnight. These conversations have been happening for a while. So when action finally happens, after public attention ramps up, with Nick Shirley being a journalist, going out there and going to these daycares, which are being funded by American taxpayers, and you have, federal monies or whatever tied to this, where it should be open to the public in regards out of respect for the American taxpayer, because you realize every program that usually is funded majority wise from either the state or the federal government, it is for the people in which we fund it through our taxes. So it should be open to the American people. So why, when Nick Shirley came there as a journalist just to see the tour, and he doesn't have kids, but he used an example as if he was enrolling a kid named Johnny, and they didn't want to give him a brochure, didn't want to give him a tour, didn't tell him come back later, tell him he wasn't accepted there, basically. Fast forward now, he's now, I think, exposing fraud in California with hospice care, and now they're trying to have a bill passed to stop Nick Shirley Act of him doing true journalism and just asking questions that the American people want to know based on their taxpayer dollars. So they want to stop him from asking questions from programs that's being funded by the American taxpayer. Think of that. So, with all that being said, it makes people wonder what's actually triggered it, right? With all the public attention ramping up. Was it the system working on its own, or did it take outside pressure to get things moving? And it came from that independent reporting from Nick Shirley, and online coverage started to play a role. When stories gain traction publicly, it creates pressure. It forces institutions to respond faster, to be more visible, to show results. That's not new. That's how modern media works. Now, to be fair, investigations like this do take time. Evidence has to be gathered. Warrants have to be approved. Agencies have to coordinate. That doesn't happen overnight. But at the same time, perception matters. And from the outside looking in, it can feel like action only comes once something becomes impossible to ignore. That's where frustration builds up too. Because now take a step back and look at the bigger picture here. What we are seeing is what happens when different levels of government actually align and enforce the law in a coordinated way. Federal, state, and local agencies sharing information, executing warrants, and following through. And in practice, it looks relatively controlled. No chaos, no confusion, just a process playing out the way it's designed to. And that raises a broader question that goes beyond just this case. If coordination like this leads to more effective enforcement in one area, why wouldn't people expect to see that same level of consistency in other areas of law enforcement and public policy? That's a fair question. From my perspective, consistency is the key issue here. People want to know that the same standards are applied across the board. I've been saying it this whole entire video, not just when something becomes high profile. Because when enforcement feels selective or delayed, trust starts to erode. And once the trust is gone, hard to rebuild from that. There's a disconnect. And at the end of the day, giving credit isn't really the point for most people watching this. The focus is on results. Are problems being addressed? Is taxpayer money being protected, no matter little or small, high or low? Are the rules actually being enforced? And that's what matters. If this level of cooperation is finally producing results, then the real takeaway is simple. It shouldn't be the exception. It should be the standard. I catch you next one, family. Spread that peace, love, and positivity. Let the love supersede the hate. And before I close, Just thought about something. Bringing it all together, right? Because this is where it really starts to matter. You got the ongoing fallout from the Feeding Our Future scandal, people pleading guilty in connection to the misuse of funds that were supposed to be helping feed kids, and now the focus is shifting to a bigger question. How did this happen in the first place, and who is responsible for oversight? That's where officials, policies, and decisions start coming into the conversation. And to be clear, being connected to a program or supporting legislation is not the same as being guilty of wrongdoing. That distinction matters. But at the same time, where there are real questions about how guardrails were removed, how money was distributed, and who was involved in shaping those systems, it is completely reasonable for taxpayers to expect answers. That's not political, that's basic accountability. People are looking at this and thinking about their own lives. And frustration and is building frustration. And that's what the frustration is building. Because if you're a small business owner, you have to account for everything. If you make a mistake, there are consequences. If you are an individual taxpayer, you don't get to ignore questions from the government. So people naturally ask, why wouldn't that same standard apply when we're talking about large amounts of public money? And when answers don't come quickly or at all, trust starts to break down. That's reality. This is bigger than any one person. And I'm not telling you how to think or what to think. It actually holds people accountable when something goes wrong. It's about whether the system is transparent as well. Zooming out, this is a pattern of a lot of people are seeing. Programs get expanded, rules get loosened, and the intention might be to help more people. But without strong oversight, it also creates opportunities for abuse. That doesn't mean the goal of helping people is wrong. It means the structure has to be solid. Guardrails exist for a reason. Without them, you don't just get inefficiency. You get situations like this where a large amount of taxpayer money are potentially misused, and it takes years to fully uncover that. Most people don't have a problem with helping families or supporting kids. Kids are the purest of the purest. They're like pure angels. But that's not what the disagreement is. The issue is whether the system is being run responsibly, helping those kids and individuals that need help. Because when people feel like their money is being wasted or mishandled, that's when they start pulling back and questioning everything. Situations like this are exactly why that trust gets shaking. Now, yes, this is going to become political. That's unavoidable. You have a politician involved, Ilhan Omar, a politician who was elected on the behalf of the people, who feels though they don't have to answer questions in regards of American taxpayer or go to the or deal with the responsibility of dealing with the processes, a part of the system, and not showing up for answers. So on one side, frustration is building, and then some people feel like, what you got to show up for? Just prove it. But when you're dealing with investigations, public money, and government oversight is going to be part of the national conversation and a part of the process if it deems investigative. A judge wrote off on it for warrants and stuff. But if you strip all that away, the core issue is simple. Are taxpayer dollars protected or not? Are the rules being enforced or not? Is there real accountability or not? That's what people care about. I'll leave it there. But what you're seeing right now, the investigations, the raids, the court cases, I know I've been supposed to close, but this is what accountability is supposed to look like. It's not always clean. It's not always comfortable, but it matters. How can accountability be comfortable when individuals who commit crimes or do things that they know they're not supposed to be doing in regards to respect to the system are doing things and feeling comfortable enough to do them? So does accountability really take comfort when it comes to enforcing it? Because if they continue to get away from it or get away with it and they run away or flee from accountability, is accountability not supposed to be aggressive enough on behalf of the American taxpayers? The same way American taxpayers are aggressively held accountable to the standard of making sure they understand the rule and the law and also the processes and abiding by the process? Let me know what you think. Look, the expectation from everyday Americans is simple. Keep it consistent. Everyday American citizens, everyday citizens. No special treatment, no delays, no picking and choosing when to enforce the rules. Just fairness across the board. At the end of the day, people don't expect perfection, but they do respect responsibility when it comes to their money. And if that starts happening more consistently, then at least we're moving in the right direction. Most Americans and most legal immigrants who came over here to this country, the United States of America, for opportunity, and they're coming with their influence and their uniqueness and continue to build up this country, the United States, right? With more opportunity, with more embrace, with more love, and with more positivity. But what do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. I'm out now for real. Peace.